Thank you, Megan. I appreciate that. Welcome, everybody. We're excited to be here today. I'm really excited. I was asked to come in and have a conversation with a couple of great professionals here for the panel, and I think we've got some great topics. And like Megan said, we want this to be very interactive. So if you have questions, please throw them in the chat. We will work them into the conversation. We'll answer your questions. I like to tell people my presentations don't work if I don't have interaction from the audience. One of the things I like to do is if we have dead air, I tell Star Wars jokes. So I'm hoping we won't have to get any Star Wars jokes today. So I'm going to go around the room real quick. We're going to start with Dr. Joe, and then we'll go to Nish, and just give us a little bit of background about yourself and what you do, and we'll get back to me, and then we'll start with some questions.
Thank you, Jonathan. It's so good to be here this afternoon. Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm just honored and tickled to death to engage in this conversation with my amazing colleagues here. So I'm Joe Perez. I was an educator for 10 years before I got into my career in information technology. Both of my graduate degrees have a major in computer studies. I was at NC State University for 25 years as business intelligence specialist, then was recruited away from the university by some amazing people at Health and Human Services, where I now am senior systems analyst and team lead. A couple of years ago, also as a fractional role, I am chief technology officer for a startup called SolonTek Corporation here in North Carolina. I enjoy what I do, have a wonderful time doing it, and I speak at conferences. I talk about actionable data, talk about leadership skills. I talk about professional development, motivation, innovation, data security, and things like that, hopefully to create value among the people in my audience. So I'm just tickled to death to be here. Jonathan, thank you again so much for allowing me on the stage to share the stage with you and Nish.
Well, thank you so much. We appreciate you being here.
Yes, sir.
Nish, please tell us about yourself.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Dr. Perez. That's an impressive background that you have. I'll try to see if I can come close to that, but my career started in software engineering. I did my bachelor's in computer science from University of Maryland, and then started doing some coding and things like that. Slowly moved into cybersecurity area, right? And for the last 20 plus years, I've been into cybersecurity. That's been my passion. Whether it's cybersecurity operations, engineering, architecture. I've done pretty much all of the domains within cybersecurity. In my current role as Director of Cybersecurity Engineering, I am managing teams from identity access management to data security, application security, network, endpoint, vulnerability. So all of these engineering, my team is responsible for deploying all of the initiatives related to all these domains, and then hand over to our operations to manage them day to day. So that's been my passion for the last 3-5 years, managing cybersecurity as part of my control. Thank you.
Absolutely. That's great. I'm honored to be up here with you guys. I'll give you just a little bit of background on me. I'm a CISO and HIPAA security officer here at the University of Tulsa. I've been CISO for the last 8-ish years now. Started off with that, actually came up through the ranks from the help desk, joined the computer security response team, did that for many years, became team lead for several years. And then when we decided to create the office of the CISO, they tapped me to take over that role. The things that I do are your typical CISO things, network security, application security, a variety of things. But one of the things I really got into several years ago was compliance and privacy compliance, starting with PCI, Gramm-Leach-Bliley, and that led into GDPR. And so a lot of the things that I do now is privacy compliance related, and the data security around those pieces, the actual security pieces to meet those compliances. And I love it. I speak about privacy all over the state, all over the country. And I think that one of my key factors that I focus on with my staff, with my SOC students is, our job is to protect people, and that's what we do. Whether it's the network security or computer security or privacy or compliance, everything we do is about protecting people. And I was actually kind of excited because when we started talking about this panel and some of the questions that were coming up, that really goes into what we're going to talk about today. And what are the threats that are out there, and what are the things that we're going to be dealing with, that we deal with from day to day. And what I like about this group is we have kind of a variety of different viewpoints, and I think this is going to be some great conversations. Again, for the audience, please throw your questions into the chat and we'll work them into the conversation. And let me ask, when we are thinking about cybersecurity, everyone is worried about nation state attacks. This is a big deal, and I can tell you, I regularly monitor our firewalls. This is my pastime at night when I'm supposed to be sleeping. I'm usually up monitoring the firewalls. And I see a lot of attacks coming in, and it's really interesting because depending on the day, it's coming from different parts of the world. So I want to kind of just an open-ended question. When we're thinking about nation state attacks and things coming from different nations, what is the real threat? What is when we're thinking about the real threat to us, to our organizations, to our maybe our business or our institutions or just our general organization? What's those threats? What is it that you guys see? What are you seeing right now is common threats, or what do you see in the future as threats? Kind of just open topic. What's your thoughts? Let's start with you, Joe.
Okay. Excuse me. Well, thank you for the question, Jonathan. I couldn't agree with you more. Okay. Whether it's facing a nation state attack or an ordinary attack or any other kind of an attack, right? The key is that we have to be ever vigilant. Always keep our guard up. Okay. According to a Gallup poll last March involving more than 1,000 people, 82% of Americans say that cyber terrorism is a critical threat. And that's up from 81% in 2019 and 73% in 2016. Our military is even more concerned about this. In a different poll, okay, military conducted by the Military Times, they found that almost 9 out of every 10 service members believe that this is the greatest danger to our national security. And get this now, at the same time, here's the point. The majority of those same service members are saying that our country is just flat out not prepared for it. So regardless of what the landscape might look like or whatever form the threat might take or the attack might take, I see the biggest threat is the perception of a lack of preparedness. And, you if you're not prepared, and if perception is that you're not prepared, well, they say perception is 90% of reality. That's how I see it.
Yeah. That preparation is really important. I had a panel, this was a couple of years ago now, but we were talking about new federal regulations that were coming out and the expectation of federal regulations about cybersecurity preparedness. And one of the things that we talked about at that time was they said that the people on the panel was talking that we don't need more regulations. We should self mandate, or the industry should self-regulate. And what I told them then at the time is like, but we're not. There's a lot of organizations that don't have CISOs. They're not preparing for cyber attacks. They're not doing. So in the cases where you're not doing those things, that's where a lot of the new regulations come from. You know, the new regulations from CISA about reporting breaches within 24 hours, and new requirements in the compliances. You know, GOBA's new requirements or the guidelines that they're putting forth for organizations for security control. So, I really think that you're right. I mean, it is a preparation issue, and the things are going to constantly be going, moving forward into the future. It's just going to get more complicated, more technical, larger risks, and I don't think we are prepared. Nish, what do you think? What's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think last year when Russia and Ukraine war broke up, right? We had this on a weekly basis. We had a call happening within our leadership that we were monitoring all of this, the examples that you gave, Jonathan, that you staying up and watching your firewall and seeing what kind of attacks are happening or what type of attempted connections are coming from different countries, right? So for a good amount of 3 months into that war, we were meeting on a weekly basis, discussing and seeing what the logs showed us, right? And then Log4j happened at the same time, around that time, right? So all of that emphasis, what we noticed that for 3 months, that while we were extra vigilant for those 3 months, but we actually had a practice that we were monitoring, collecting all of the data that because us organization, BlueCross BlueShield, we don't have customers outside of the United States. So we absolutely do not allow even our employees to be working outside of the United States. So we were actually blocking any connections coming out of outside of the United States. So we were actually taking all of the precautions against the nation state actors, right? So we noticed that we were doing things that were good enough, but not still great enough, because there are, as we all know, there are means people can bypass them by using VPNs and a lot of other stuff, right?
Right.
So then we then started developing newer technologies to get past that, and I think that there are vendors like Palo Alto, and they have some sort of solution that you can work with. But to your point, yes, nation state actors, and those are constant threats. They're going after your healthcare industry. They're going after your infrastructure, right? And we're not prepared. Honestly, we're not prepared. We're trying to be there, but just a famous saying, and I think we've all heard in cybersecurity, that a hacker has 24 hours. And we as protectors, we work 8, 10, 12, 14 max hours per day, right? So we're fighting a battle that's really, really uphill task. But
yeah, absolutely. I tell you a little story. So when I first became CISO many years ago, we didn't have a budget. Just new office. I think my budget was $2,000. Which is kind of funny thinking about it now. But so what I did was I bought a bunch of Raspberry Pis, and at the time you could still buy them for $30 or $40. But I put them out as sensors on the network, and using them as for individual nodes of an IDS. Same time frame that you were talking about during the Ukraine and Russia conflict, the beginning of the conflict there, the war. I have a sensor that's outside our firewall, and it just sits there and monitors. It's very passive. It just listens, and then it gives me a list of the top 10, 25 countries. 10 is what I grab, but 25 countries that attacks this. And it was really interesting watching it every day, as we were leading up, and then during, and then after. What were and when I talk about the attacks coming in from the countries, what I'm talking about, we were getting hit on that box from IPs from other countries. You get just a little bit technical there, but those are the things that when we're looking at our firewalls and looking at our logs, we go, okay, we get all these types of connections, these types of scans from these different countries. But during that time frame, it shifted. We were seeing a lot of stuff coming in from one country that we normally see. And then all of a sudden we started getting a whole lot from Ukraine. Then we saw a whole lot coming in from Russia. and it would go back and forth every day or so, and you'd see the top hits. Now, again, what were they doing? Were they trying? Our firewall was blocking it, but still there was attempted connection. So it was really, for me, it was enlightening, because I like to know what's coming into our network, what's trying to get in, because I need to know what I need to be looking for on the inside of my network. And if you don't know anything about what's coming in and out, there's no way for you to search that stuff. So it's a interesting thing, as CISOs or, any sort of IT professional, when we're thinking about our networks and we're thinking about organizations, we have to think very broad, about everything that's happening in the world. It's not just, we've got this breach over here with this particular software. I mean, I teach my SOC students in here, they got to look at news articles, regular news articles, just not cybersecurity news, what's happening in the world and how is that affecting us? Because those interactions between nation states do have an effect on how we do security. I mean, we all talked about it, just now, what we were doing when those things were happening. We got a question that came in. I think it's a really good question, and I want to get everyone's thoughts on this. And the question is, with so many risk frameworks available, such as NIST, do you have recommendation or preference of one over the other? So I would expect they're talking about, I know what they're talking about NIST and ISO, and I'm going to throw PCI in there and a few others. So let me ask you guys, number one, what do you see the benefit of some of these cybersecurity risk management frameworks that we have out there for businesses? So thinking about the nation state, the types of attacks that are out there, what is the benefit of some of these frameworks, and what is kind of your favorite framework if you have one? So we'll start with you, Nish. And what's your thoughts on the NIST versus the NIST 800 versus the ISO 27001? Any of those?
Yeah, so I think different industries, and when you look at different industries, there's preference over choosing one or the other, right? If you look at ISO 27000 series, right? That's more popular in manufacturing industry. It's internationally widely known, so. So someone international plant, you could have plants in different countries, and I think ISO is more widely accepted in other countries. So you may want to go with that kind of framework if you have offices or plants in different countries. But NIST is a pretty good standard within the United States. I've been into 3 or 4 different companies where we had adopted NIST as our framework, and which gives us a good baseline, good standards as to our maturity of our cybersecurity program. And NIST handles pretty good from all of the domain when it comes to risk, governance, data security, application identity, access management. My preference is NIST because it deals, it covers all of the domains, and it gives you a good, nice maturity, or the roadmap that you can aspire towards taking your program to a next level. So NIST is my preference, but it depends on what industry you are.
Yeah, absolutely. And, in some cases, you might have contractual obligations that might dictate you have to be ISO certified or, meet NIST requirements for CMMC or whatever. How about you, Joe? What's your thoughts on ISO versus NIST versus CIS, any of those?
Right. I agree with Nish that, it depends on the best answer that a technical person can give. It depends, right? Any yes, no answer. We always say it depends upon whatever factors you're looking at, your industry, the hierarchical obligations, any contractual obligations, as was mentioned, the country in which you live. But yeah, I would prefer the NIST, the standards that the longevity that's with it, it's something that's already an established standard. right? Very popular and so forth. And
Yep.
you have a broader base of support and adoption.
Yeah, absolutely. I will tell you that I start with PCI, and I know that everyone's going to say, well, that's credit cards, and and what I tell them is if you change your mindset and stop thinking about that it's about credit cards, but it's about protecting the data. You have 12 things, in the list. Do you have a firewall? Do you change your default passwords? Do you look at your logs? These are the basics of the basics. And if you can't do those pieces, it's going to be really hard to do the NIST and the ISO and then so on and so on.
Regardless of the framework, if you don't have those basics down, then you don't,
exactly,
it's not going to matter.
Exactly. So,
right.
I would say, because the question asks, do you have recommendation or preference of the one over the other? I would say the one that you follow is going to be the best one you have. But you've got to have those fundamentals. If you don't get those fundamentals, then no framework is really going to help you. So that's one of those things that, people, and I work with organizations all the time that, they might have ISO requirements or NIST requirements, but here's the reality. If you do the basics well, you can hit both of them. They work really, you have the same general controls out there you need to deploy if you're doing good things. So I like NIST because it's easy to get into. It's just freely available. You don't have to pay to get the bits and pieces. And we have a lot of requirements for NIST, so I'm a bit more familiar with it and the things that we have to do here. But ISO covers a lot of stuff, and if that's a requirement for your organization, it's a good requirement. If you can get to it, you're in a good spot. Any of them, if you follow them, you're in a good spot. So find the one that's going to work for your organization that you need to meet, and you're going to be doing good. And tying it back to the original question is, when we think about these nation state attacks or any attacks to our organization, the fundamental piece is we have to protect ourselves. All of these frameworks, all these requirements are telling us, they give us that checklist of what we need to do to protect. What do you need to have turned on? What do you need to have turned on? What do you need to look at? What, in some cases, some of the guidelines are you have to have a dedicated individual, a dedicated professionally trained individual doing this stuff. You've got to have someone who knows what they're doing. So, there's so much. Of course, we only have an hour, and I'm sure we can all go into just the frameworks for an hour. So I won't go too much more, but it's really important to get that guidelines, regardless of what you use, and start working through that just to protect your organization. We do have some more questions, so please keep those questions coming. I'm going to hold off on the next question just for a bit because I'm going to try to work that into the next segment. But when we're talking about the nation state attackers, one of the next really things is what are the common ways that a business is going to go down? When we think about a nation state attacking us and actually being successful, what are those things? So let's think about those common things that's going to hit us in an organization. I'm talking ransomware. I'm talking email attacks. I'm talking, maybe a denial of service attack. So what do you think most businesses are highest risk of seeing out there? What do you thinking about the news, thinking about your own businesses or your organization you're talking about? What is it you're seeing the most out there right now? Let's start with Joe this time.
The denial of service.
Okay. Yep. That's a big one, especially if we have big networks.
Right.
Because
it's an easy attack, Yeah. You just keep banging away, and and you get your results.
It's really hard to defend against it, honestly.
Yeah.
They hit you really hard. We got hit not too long ago. A single server got hit so hard that it almost tied up both our firewalls.
Wow.
Now we were able to catch it and get rid of it pretty quick, but it was effectively a denial of service attack against us. So yeah, I agree. DOS is a big one. Nish, how about you? What are you seeing out there as a common one?
Yeah, so I know just a few minutes back we were all talking about doing the basic things, you know, and I always say to my cybersecurity teams that cybersecurity at the end of the day is pretty simple, right? If you do the basic things right, you're gonna avoid a lot of the attacks. So what we're seeing, what I've seen is people are not patching, and the vulnerability management and patch management is so repetitive and so could be so boring process, but it is one of the most critical process. If not taken care of it, that's where all these malware and ransomware and phishing attacks do tend to creep in, and even the DDoS attacks, right? If you secure your perimeters through these known attacks, right? Patched and vulnerability managed, right? You will be able to take care of those. So I think I've seen a lot of these DDoS attacks and malware because of unpatched systems being out on our perimeter, which lets the attacker get in, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, you're absolutely right. That's a fundamental. And that's going to be in every control out there and every framework is, are you doing your patches?
It's so easy to miss too.
It is. It is. And here's the thing. I was in this organization once and I was talking to them and they said, oh yeah. You know, we've got this automatic patch server and it's been, you know, we've got it all configured. Everything's doing it. They should get it, in this the first week after Patch Tuesday, there's this test machines, and then the second week you'll get to a broader audience, and the third week everybody else gets it. It's like, hey, that's great. This is going to be, here's your let me see your documentation. Everything was great. I said, okay, let's get into the server and let's take a look at it. The server was locked up. Okay. When was the last time someone got into the server? Well, no one could tell me. Okay. Well, let's reboot it and let's get into it. It had been 1.5 years since someone had logged into that server. It had been locked up for probably most of that time. So as far as they were concerned, their machines were getting patched, but no one was checking on the control. No one was looking at that patch server. And so it was just easy to go, oh yeah, we've got that set up. It's working. We'll just leave that alone. And then all of a sudden and I'll tell you what happened. It took a whole year to get everything caught back up on their patching, because you start deploying a year's worth of patches, you're going to bring down the network. So yeah, absolutely. Those fundamentals are really important. And most of the attacks have some form of, if you're not doing good fundamentals, it's going to catch you on those attacks.
You can't adopt the Ron Popeil mentality, right? You remember the commercials, set it and forget it. It does not work that way. Ron Popeil, I love the guy, but he was definitely not in the cybersecurity.
Oh, that is great. I'm going to steal that, and I'm going
Please do. Yes, right. Yeah, get a YouTube of Ron Popeil actually saying that to make it even more effective. Set it and forget it. Doesn't work, buddy.
I don't know about the audience members, but I'm really enjoying this panel, by the way. This is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've got a next question, and we're going to kind of tie into. So we've talked about the nation states, we talked about the fundamentals, and we've talked about these attacks. But what about communicating this? If a CISO wants to be better at communicating to the organization, to the board or to the business, to the board, what are some things that you think they should do to get better at that? Give me one takeaway that you would tell a CISO who wants to be better at communicating to people. What's that one takeaway? So we'll start with you, Joe.
Okay. Am I muted? Okay.
No, you're good.
All right. So, Jonathan, there are a number of takeaways that I could share, but here's the one that I see as the most useful, the most critical. And that is to get people to take personal responsibility and ownership for cybersecurity themselves, back to the fundamentals that we talked about before. By that, I mean, the regular people, the average employee. And I say that, average in air quotes, right? I submit that we need to get away from any crazy notion that tries to say that cybersecurity is just for the CISO. It's just for the one who has that CMMC certification, just for the ones who work on the network, right? No, cybersecurity is for everybody, right? And that message needs to be communicated loud and clear from the top to the bottom. It's been said that a chain is only as strong as its weakest link, right? So in the same way, an institutional security profile is only as strong as its most gullible employee. I believe it starts with just regular common sense that we've been talking about. Being aware of your surroundings, keeping your eyes open, never letting your guard down. Folks, you do not have to click on that link that you got from the Prince of Abu Dhabi, who told you that he would transfer 42 million euros into your account today, just so that you can hold it for him. Yeah, right. You do not have to open that attachment from your CEO who unexpectedly emails you at 3 a.m. He's at a conference and says he needs to wire you some money. Wink, wink. Yeah, I forgot my wallet. Listen, you can make all of your IT staff have all of the network safety and security certifications and training in the world. But if the regular people, the non-technical people, are not exercising due diligence, using common sense, and keeping their eyes open, let me tell you something. Your goose is cooked. Obviously, these examples seem a little obvious and silly, but I'm doing that on purpose because I'm trying to make a point, and that is for the CISO to be effective in communicating this message. Leadership needs to be absolutely crystal clear on this. Okay, they need to be committed not only to the telling of the right message, but also the living of that message, and doing so in a unified, consistent manner across the board. That is cybersecurity awareness and caring about it, giving a crud about it, okay, is not just the technical staff's responsibility. It's your responsibility. It's my responsibility. It is our responsibility. Now, to the extent that this message can be made clear from leadership all the way down and all the way across, that's the extent to which the effective CISO is going to be able to get some sleep at night.
Yep, absolutely. I agree 100%. All right, Nish, how about you? What's your one takeaway?
I think everything what Joe said, I totally agree. I don't think I can say it any better. Joe, you summed it up pretty nicely. The only thing that I think I would say is I've been into 2 or 3 different organizations where we've taken 2 different approaches, and one was sending this message, CISO sending this message, and then people having negative repercussions of clicking on those links, and then we would tie them to their performance goals. That didn't really go well because negative. Instead, in my current organization, the approach that we've taken is we actually started recognizing people that have actually reported on those phishing campaigns, started reporting phishing, right? So we started recognizing those people in town halls and started recognizing those people with possible small gift cards and things like that. That's actually worked much better for morale. So that's the only other feedback that I would give. Other than that, I think, Joe, you summed it up really good.
Yeah, one of the things, we're talking about that positive reinforcement. One of the things that I try to do, I want to say I do it every time, but I try to do every single time someone sends me, hey, is this a fish? And I get hundreds of those a day. I always tell them thank you, because I want them to, number one, always check. If it's a real email, I'll tell them. If it's a phishing email, I'll tell them. But I want them to check. And number two, I want them to feel comfortable coming to me and asking me that question. Every single time I always try to say thank you. And I'll tell you, when we get hit with like a spam bomb on campus or something, and I send a note out to campus saying, hey, everybody, we have seen this. We know, please delete it, if we can't catch it in time. But every single, I'll spend hours, just replying, hey, yep, we know this is thank you for checking. We appreciate if you have any other questions, let us know. And I think that being available is critically important, is being able, because if you can't, like you said, Joe, if you can't get that clear message across to people, if they're not listening to you, they're not going to get it. They're not going to understand it. And like what you said, Nish, if you're not getting that positive reinforcement back of them feeling like they're doing a good thing about checking, about testing, about asking questions, that's hugely important. I'll tell you, one of the other things that I like doing, and I use this a lot, is I equate CISOs to magicians. A lot of times there's a lot of magic we have to do. But what I always tell CISOs, especially young CISOs who are coming up, is we always have to have a trick ready. If you guys know any magicians, if you interact with them, part of your family or whatever, you'll know that they always have some tricks ready. They always have a deck of cards. They'll have something in, they might have a coin, they might have something, in their hands to do. And I do a little bit of magic. But as a CISO, if I'm in a department talking to someone about something, or if I'm in a board meeting and they start asking questions, I need to be able to demonstrate it. I need to say, hey, that's a good question. Let me bring up the logs real quick, and I'll bring it up and I'll show them. They may not catch 98% of the stuff that's on that screen, but they ask a question and I was able to show it. I did this in a board meeting one day. This was years ago now. I told you that my budget was $2,000 for a long time. I was in a board meeting. They asked me a question. And it's like, hey, let me show you. Let me show you how easy it is to do blah. Now, I don't advise doing this ever, but I did a live attack against a random computer on campus and got into it. I popped it with Metasploit. Pure luck that I just happened to be able to do it. But it turned into a great conversation in the board because, randomly I lifted my laptop. I jumped into a Linux box. I scanned, I popped it. I'm on the desktop. I found a bunch of documents on the desktop. So it was a great experience for them because then, one, they saw how easy it was. Number two, I got to tell them not only about, segmentation, about firewalls, about shadow IT, all these things. But had I not had that stuff ready to demonstrate and knew it myself, then they would not have been able to have that experience. When I walked away from that board meeting, my budget was significantly more. So it was a good experience. So I always tell people, that one takeaway is make sure you can have the conversation. Make sure you can be that magician and have those tricks of the trade up your sleeve and ready to go at a moment's notice so you can demonstrate this up. Because if you can't get it, like you said, Joe, if you can't get it across clearly to them, and Nish, if it's not a good experience, then they're not going to be supportive of us, supportive of us as CISOs. So that's one of the things that I really try to get across to people. All right. So we've got a question here, and it's a good question. So it actually goes back to what we were talking about earlier, and that's specifically patch management. And the question is this: when it comes to patch management, what factors do you engage to determine criticality? So I'm going to start with this just because patch management is near and dear to my heart. I told you the story about the servers not working. And this is how I explain it to people. How could you justify to a court if you refuse to deploy critical and security updates as recommended by the manufacturer? So I state that in a very specific way for people, because again, if a manufacturer, let's say Windows or whatever, is providing you a critical or security update for their product, they're recommending that you do this for critical or security reasons, I think it would be really difficult to defend not deploying those patches. So The question is, when it comes to patch management, what factors do you engage in determining criticality? I would say for me, for my organizations, you look at the criticality of the system, if it's got data or if it's a critical service, but then you look at what is the criticality of the patch, if it's critical or security patch. My recommendation is deployment. So I want to get your guys' thoughts. So Nish, I'll start with you. What's your thoughts on patch management and that criticality?
Oh yeah, this is also seemed pretty close to me. We can dissect this in so many different ways. And it depends. Again, don't want to give a general answer. It depends, but it truly depends on the business. What kind of data you're protecting, where the data resides, right? Where is your your critical data is residing. So having a good asset management system, identifying what data stays where, and then once you get these vulnerability reports from either from whatever tool you're using, Qualys, Tenable, or whatnot, right? You identify those assets and say, are these assets critical enough? Are they sitting, do they have critical data? Are they sitting on your DMZ network? Are they internet facing? What is the exposure to that particular vulnerability, right? So you determine criticality based on that. And that's how we've been able to implement system. And there are other, there are different tools that you can merge data from Tenable to asset management into a risk management tool, and that will create a risk score for each of your assets based on what application does it have. So you can do that. At the end of the day, Jonathan, you're right. If my Tenable data report says that XYZ vulnerability is critical, right? It's going to be really hard for me to go and say, okay, this asset does not have critical data, so it's not critical patch. Guess what? That server might not have critical data, but now you're leaving that server open that someone could get into that server and can then get into other critical data. So it's a means of creating a criticality, but at the end of the day, you really need to treat everything really critical. You can possibly get exceptions based on some of these risk points, but honestly, you need to treat them critical if there is critical, right, vulnerabilities.
And if you do get an exception, or even if there is an exception for one reason or another, you still have to put in mitigating controls. If you can't patch a box, let's say you have a Windows XP box that's running a piece of equipment and you can't replace that equipment, you can't patch because there are no patches for it. You still have to implement those mitigating controls. And that's going to be your framework telling you that, okay, what is your control library? What do you need to do? And those pieces are really important. So you're absolutely right. I think having that structure of what is critical, what are the critical updates, all this, I will tell you that I hope gone are the days of server administrator saying, I'm not going to deploy a Microsoft patch because it keeps breaking my server. We can't do that anymore. We have to patch. Okay, Joe, what's your thoughts on that criticality and patch management?
Yes, sir. Boy, you guys already hit the nail on the head, and you can't hit a nail but so many times. But, look at it the way a hospital looks at things, right? It's all about hierarchy and triage. Okay. What's the bang for the buck? What's the time for the money? What's, what is your hierarchy? What does your business say? What does the manufacturer say? All the things that you guys mentioned, can your mom be happy with what you've done today? Okay. Maybe, I don't know, whatever motivation, right?
Right.
Can you look your mom in the face, or can you look your board in the face? Can you look your customer in the face, right? What risk versus reward, action versus inaction, negligence versus dedication, right? How do you weigh that, and what factors do you use, and what are the results of going A or B? So
Yep.
once you weigh those things and you recognize, okay, well, if they say it's got to be done, then dadgummit, it's got to be done. And if I don't, then my goose is cooked. If later on it'll
Yep.
come back to bite me, and whatever time that I might have saved by not doing it, I'm going to spend 3 times as much time either mitigating it, making up for it, or explaining why I didn't do it.
Yeah.
Or in taking something for my headache that's caused by the pressure that I have put myself under for not following the prescribed course of action in the first place. Save yourself the trouble. If your wife says, "Does this dress make me look fat?" Say, "Darling, you look wonderful," right? Discretion is the better part of valor. You say, what does that have to do with cyber? It has everything to do with cybersecurity, because it's that same mindset. The path of least resistance, the path of least headache, the path of least nightmare is just to do what you're supposed to do and follow the hierarchy, follow the playbook, and keep moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the little tidbits that I give people when we're talking about making those decisions, like you said, Joe, don't stop trying to interpret yourself. Here's a perfect example. If I have to go to court, I am not going to tell the judge that something is industry standard or this is the right way of doing it. What I'm going to tell the judge is, if you go ask 10 other CISOs out in the world, they are going to say this is the right way to do it. Now, the reason why I say it like that is because I will absolutely tell the judge to do that. And you know what the judge is going to do? He's going to go do that. So step back. If I am trying to interpret something, I am not going to try to evaluate and go, well, it says this, but I think we can get away with this. Instead, you should go, if a judge asks 10 professional CISOs out in the world, or IT professionals in general, what are they going to say is the industry practice, the standard practice? Because if I'm not doing that, then, and that judge does it, that's going to be a problem, So I always tell people, think about what 10 other CISOs are going to say. And if you can get it within that realm, then you're probably doing an okay job. If you're not, that may be a problem for you. So, okay. We're going on about 12 minutes now left in the panel. This has been a great panel, but I've got some more topics for us to cover a little bit. And, here's one that's going to be interesting because I want to get your guys' thoughts. We are entering probably an economic downturn. Here's budgets, funding are probably going to go down for organizations for a variety of reasons. We talked about threats are always going to increase, the nation states and various other pieces. So what do you think? Do you think security is going to be affected by this? Do you think we're going to lose budget? Or do you think we're going to be able to clearly communicate to the board what we need and they're going to understand those risks? So I want to start with you, Joe. What's your thoughts about what's going to happen? What are we going to see over the next couple of years? You're muted.
Okay, sorry about that.
Yep.
Okay, so yeah, great question. Well, I tell you, they say that supposedly, if you throw enough money at a problem, right, any problem can be tackled if you throw enough money and resources at it, right? So, I don't want to paint with too broad a brush here because, sometimes, well, the money that's spent isn't really spent efficiently. And sometimes when it comes to resources, well, they're not deployed to the right place or at the right time or in the right way. They might even be resources that are unqualified or overworked or ill-suited to the task. Okay, many different variables involved here, but all those if, ands, and buts and provisos aside here, when you have a healthy budget in place to buy those tools that you need, and you have the right resources in place that are qualified to wield those tools effectively, okay, then, well, you're in a whole lot better shape than you would be in if you were missing the one or the other, or both for that matter, right? Say, the tools are great, all right, but only if they are the right tool for the right job, for one thing. And even if they are the right tool and the best tool, guess what? Any tool is only as good as the hand that wields it. All right. That's where the resources come in. You've got to have plenty of hands that are going to wield those tools. All right. And they have to belong to confident, competent, skilled people that you've brought in to do the jobs that we've been talking about. Okay. Guess what? All that stuff, well, it takes money. It costs. It's not free. And while there may be certain commodities that you could conceivably do without, especially in this economic downturn that you talked about here, you know what? Security and compliance. Hey, these are areas that you definitely don't need to be skimping out on, especially considering the threats, the clear and present danger that we've been talking about. And this is one area that I'm extremely glad that I've seen it's not really being skimped upon. So I think, yes, we make the case, then the money will follow. I mean, just like you made the case and the money followed when you went from the $2,000 to getting something that was a bit more adequate for your needs.
Right. Yeah, no. And I think that really does come down to what we talked about earlier is you need to have clear communication to your leadership and be successful in communicating with them. And I think that once we show them, I think everyone understands the risks and they understand that we're trying to protect the organization and they're going to be supportive of us if we do it the right way. Communication. And I think that that's going to be a huge piece. All right, Nish, what's your thoughts on that? What do you think? Do you think cybersecurity budgets might go down? Or do you think we're pretty safe in that in most organizations?
I think we're pretty safe in most organizations. I haven't seen my budget go down. Touch wood, luckily. And matter of fact, it has actually gone up this year. My problem is somewhat what I think Joe was alluding towards was I haven't been able to hire all the key resources. We've got all these technologies and we got all these openings. We're still we got positions that have been open for the last 6-8 months, and we haven't been able to find the right candidate. So while even if there was an economic downturn, and I think we still would be in a position that we'd still be looking for people. So I think security in general, we've created good awareness, and we shouldn't be skimping on it. There are enough threats to the data that we are protecting, right? That we need to be working towards taking care of it. So I think we are decently in a good shape at this point.
Yeah. I started recently, about a year ago, I started the process of having a student SOC, a student-led SOC. So now this is a security operations center, but it is specifically manned by students that I hire. And my whole intent on it is, while I need the help, don't get me wrong, and I love having them, they do a wonderful job for me, I really wanted to give them that 1 year or 2 years of hands-on experience so that when they went out and got an entry-level job, right out of college, that their resume was just that next step up from other resumes, that they had some real experience in this. And I'll tell you what, these students love it. man, they catch
Mm-hmm.
this stuff on so quick. They're grabbing onto it, and I'm giving them as much as I can give them in terms of access and skill sets and learning and growing and threat hunting, and they're doing a really great job. But I feel bad for students who don't get an opportunity like that. They're coming out of college, they're coming out of a program, but they don't have any hands-on experience, and they're going in organizations, and it's really hard.
It is hard. Yeah.
I'm hoping that we kind of get into this mode of bringing in some young talent and really developing them and growing them into a state that we need them to be, because again, in 5 years, they're going to be that mid-range. In 10 years, they're going to be CISOs. It's going to grow very quickly, and we need to do that starting now. So I agree with both of you on that. I think that the budgets are going to stay. I think when we're talking about talent, we got to foster that talent and bring that talent up and get people. And I think we need to do that across the board. Talent in the boards, talent in the leadership, talent in IT, bringing all of them up in their security skill sets is going to be just that much more helpful to us.
Rising water lifts all boats, as they say.
Absolutely. So we've only got a few minutes left. We did have one question that I kind of saved towards the end because it really talked about when we are looking at going to the cloud. So we are going to the cloud. We're going to move to software as a service or infrastructure as a service or anything as a service. And the question is, what do you think are the legal and audit challenges for IT when an application or process is moved to the external cloud? And I'll tell you, I'm going to start off on this one just because, again, this is one of my passions. When we're talking about moving to the cloud, we still need to have our fundamentals. We still need to know what data we have, who has access to it, what are the security controls, what are the vendor agreements. So I honestly don't believe from a CISO perspective and a framework perspective, anything changes. I still have to do all of my security controls and make sure whether I'm doing them or the company is doing them, I still want to make sure they're being done. I still got to go through that checklist, that framework to make sure it's there. But I wanted to get your guys' thoughts. So Nish, how about you? What's your thoughts on going to the cloud and the ramifications for that, for audit and legal purposes for the organization?
Yeah, it's. I think, Jonathan, you're right. You're right. Depending on which organization you are, right? There's certain compliances, certain contractual requirements that your organization might need to follow. If does the cloud provider, SaaS or PaaS, are they FedRAMP certified or not? Is that a requirement? Right. That is something that legal might need to verify it. Any other compliances, SOC 2 report you may need to gather, and those are the things that your legal and audit team might be auditing you on because on your on-prem data center, they may not be concerned with those kind of compliances. But besides that, I think you need to be doing this, whether it's your data identity access management, whether you're doing it on-prem or PaaS or SaaS, you need to be following the same security controls over there too.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. All right, Joe, what's your thoughts about that? Moving to the cloud and the requirements of that?
Sure. Again, both of you guys, as usual, hit the nail on the head. Okay. Again, saying it a whole lot better than I could, being involved in that more so than I am. But yeah, whatever you do, when you are moving to the cloud, okay, are you going to be in compliance with all requirements? What is the cost factor involved? What is the scalability? What is the capability? Can it handle? Can your new environment handle everything that's going to be thrown at it, both from a capacity standpoint as well as a usage traffic standpoint, and so on? What compliance requirements are there? Because as you so aptly said, Nish, it depends what type of an organization are you in. Is it an educational institution? Is it a corporation? Is it a government entity? different organizations are going to have different types of requirements and different areas of compliance that have to be adhered to. So are you still going to be able to meet those requirements, both from a compliance standpoint, from a usage standpoint, from a capacity standpoint, from a storage standpoint, from throughput and so forth? Can your vendor handle everything that you're going to be throwing at it? And if it can, then move forward and just provide the best service you can possibly do.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. And I think that's exactly what people need to do, is they really sit down, and none of your requirements go away.
That's
you still
right.
have to think about your bandwidth and, what's going to be your uptime and your business continuity, all that stuff, along with all the security controls. So we've got about 1 minute left, and this has been a great conversation. I've really enjoyed it. I think we've covered a lot of great topics here, and there's been a lot of nuggets and such. So the one thing I want to ask from all of us is, what is your one little piece that you want the audience to walk away from this topic or from this panel, that they go, that's what I'm going to remember Dr. Joe from, or from Jonathan from, or from Nish from? What's that one thing? So I'm going to start with you, Dr. Joe. Tell me, what's that one thing you want that audience to leave away with, that little tidbit, that little nugget?
Sure. So you are the most valuable asset that this organization has. Keep telling yourself that. If somebody else is going to tell you, listen to them and act accordingly. If you are a valued member of this organization, then the things that you do matter. The opinions that you bring to the table matter. The behavior that you exhibit matter. The concerns that you bring up matter. And continue to bring up those concerns. If you see something, say something. You've heard that said before. Common sense rules of school, anything that you learned, things you learned in kindergarten. Hey, speak up, say something, continue to show that great common sense. And if you don't have any, then learn some. Be willing to bring things up if it bothers you, if you see something that's not exactly right. Be aware of your surroundings, know what you're doing, and take ownership. Don't just assume that it's somebody else's job. We've said this 2 or 3 times. We've alluded to it. It is your job. It's my job. Take personal responsibility. Take ownership for it. Take pride in what you're doing, and recognize that you are indeed making a positive contribution. You are the reason for our success.
I like that. That's a good one. All right, Nish, what's your one tidbit takeaway?
Thank you, Joe. You said, again, you covered it so much in that little time, but I would say 2 things. Bring passion. The cybersecurity community is a small community. We need to grow. There's a lot of jobs out there. So bring passion. Excite other people to join this community and help us. And last but not least, do the fundamentals. Keep doing the basic things right, and we'll all be in much better shape.
Yeah, absolutely.
Those are the 2.
Yeah, no, those are great. I love both of those. My takeaway for everything is, cybersecurity is about people. Everything we do, It's about people. We're protecting people. We're working with people. We're interacting with people. We've said it many times here on this panel. So, but speaking of people, thank you so much for joining me and coming up on the panel with with all of us. I think it's been a great conversation. We're going to have a hard cutoff here in a second, but I'm going to turn it back over to Megan and the pieces of moving forward on the next presentation. And I think there's going to be a small break in between. Thank you so much. I hope the audience has got a lot out of this. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of the afternoon, and we will all see you next time.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks all.
Thank you.